It was a cold, uneventful Friday night when I first heard the name, Nightmare Man. The kind of night where the only thing on your mind is the small, insignificant distractions of the day, sipping coffee at the corner cafe, catching a glimpse of your reflection as you passed an old window, and half-heartedly scrolling through your phone. But this night, something felt off. Maybe it was the weather, maybe the fact that Emma, one of the quietest people in our group, had started talking about him in that strange, cryptic way that made even the most mundane topic feel sinister. The house was filled with the low hum of chatter, some friends talking about their school lives, others joking about anything and everything. I was sitting on the old, creaky sofa in the living room, barely paying attention, when Emma's voice suddenly cut through the noise. "Have you heard of the Nightmare Man?" Everyone turned to her, intrigued by the sudden shift in tone. Emma wasn't the type to bring up strange topics, let alone those that seemed to carry a weight of fear with them. She was always the quiet one, content to stay in the background and observe the rest of us. I raised an eyebrow, trying to mask my skepticism. "Nightmare Man? Sounds like another urban legend." She gave a slow nod. "Maybe. But this one is different. He's not like the others." She leaned in a little, as if the very mention of his name required secrecy, though we all knew she was the one who had started the conversation. "He's a force. Something that punishes those who break certain rules. I've read about him. Heard stories." At first, no one took her seriously. We all exchanged glances and shrugged, thinking this was just another of Emma's weird interests. I mean, we all knew she had a thing for dark, twisted stories, especially those with a psychological edge. But something in her voice made me pause. I caught a hint of genuine fear in her eyes, a fleeting shadow of something that didn't belong in the light of the living room. "Rules?" I asked. "Like what?" "Don't talk to strangers. Don't go out at night." She nodded, a distant, almost fearful look in her eyes. "Exactly. Things that are common sense. But once you break them, once you ignore them, the Nightmare Man comes for you." The rest of us laughed nervously, brushing it off as just another exaggerated ghost story. The kind of thing you tell around a campfire, designed to scare and thrill, but not to be taken seriously. "You mean like those creepy YouTube videos, right?" Mark chimed in, sitting up from his place at the far end of the room. He had a knack for turning every conversation into something about memes or viral videos. "The ones where people play pranks and make up legends for fun?" Emma's gaze never wavered. "No," she whispered. "This is different. The rules aren't just for fun. If you break them, there's consequences." Her words hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. I could feel it, the sudden shift from light-hearted to serious, like something had just broken through the walls we had built around our casual conversation. And the strangest part? No one dared to laugh anymore. "What kind of consequences?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Emma looked directly at me, her eyes dark with something I couldn't place. "The Nightmare Man doesn't just hurt you. He hunts you." A chill ran down my spine. I was about to make some kind of dismissive joke to lighten the mood, but something held me back. It was the way she spoke, the way her lips trembled slightly when she mentioned the word hunt. Like she knew it was real, like she had seen it. Okay. Let's say this is real," Mark said, trying to keep things light. "What kind of rules are we talking about here? Don't stay out after dark. Don't go near old buildings or something?" Emma nodded solemnly, her eyes darkening. "Exactly. And it's not just places or times. It's the simple things we forget, things we dismiss as unnecessary, like when you do something dangerous just because you're curious. Or when you ignore an obvious warning. Or when you—" She stopped mid-sentence, her face paling slightly. "You know what I mean. We all break the rules sometimes. And that's when he comes." I wanted to laugh. I really did. But there was something about her tone, something about the way she spoke about the nightmare man, that kept me on edge. Maybe it was the sudden sense of dread that seemed to seep into the room. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that I couldn't help but feel watched. We moved on, of course, pushing the conversation aside to talk about other things. But Emma's words stuck with me. As much as I wanted to forget them, I couldn't. And deep down, I began to wonder if there was something more to her story than she was letting on. The days passed in a blur of classes, errands, and the usual distractions. But even as I went through the motions of my life, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that something wasn't right. I started to notice small things, things that had always been there but now felt off. A shadow flickering in the corner of my eye, the feeling that someone was watching me just a little too closely, like I was being followed when no one was behind me. It was strange, but I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just stress. Maybe I was being paranoid. That was until that night. It was around midnight when I received the first message. It was an anonymous text, the kind of thing you get from people you don't recognize, just a string of numbers and letters, no context. It read, "You broke the rule." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. But the message didn't sit right with me. The cold, hollow feeling that it left in my gut was something I couldn't ignore. I should have deleted the message and gone to bed. I should have brushed it off as a stupid joke or the ramblings of someone who had too much time on their hands. But I couldn't. I stared at the screen, the glowing letters taunting me in the silence of the night. I wasn't sure what rule I had broken, but something deep in my bones told me that this wasn't just a random text. The following morning, the unease had only deepened. The nagging sense that something was off lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I tried to shake it, tried to focus on school and everything else that demanded my attention, but the sensation wouldn't leave. And then, it happened. It was a Friday night, again, and I was out with a group of friends, trying to take my mind off the creeping paranoia that had been eating away at me. We'd decided to go for a drive, just to talk and get away from the stresses of life. We were passing through the part of town no one ever really visits, the forgotten streets, the ones with buildings so old they looked like they had been abandoned for decades. And that's when I saw it. The old church. The one everyone in town talked about but avoided. The one with the rumors. It had always been there, just standing at the edge of the town like an old ghost. We'd passed it hundreds of times, but tonight it felt different. It was almost like it was calling to me. Without thinking, I pulled over. My friends looked at me, confused. "What are you doing?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know," I muttered. "I just feel like I need to go in." They were hesitant, but after a moment of silence, they followed me. As we approached the church, I felt that same cold, unsettling feeling that I couldn't explain. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, and the air inside was thick with dust. The light from outside barely filtered through the broken windows, casting long, twisted shadows on the cracked stone floor. The air seemed to shift as we stepped inside. There was a presence here. A sense of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. And then I heard it, the voice. Low, guttural, and filled with warning. The voice was unmistakable, deep, guttural, almost like a whisper, but louder than anything I had heard before. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing in the shadows of the church as we stood frozen in place. "You've broken the rules." My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of blood rushing in my ears drowning out everything else. My friends stood stock-still beside me, their faces pale and confused, as if they, too, could feel the weight of whatever was happening. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, though I couldn't bring myself to speak. The air around us had grown heavy, thick with an oppressive energy I couldn't explain. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice, but the church was empty, its walls crumbling, the pews long forgotten. We weren't alone, though. The very air seemed to hum with a presence that was watching us, listening to every breath, every movement. "We need to leave," Mark said, his voice shaking, but his feet stayed rooted to the ground, as if the very floor beneath him had become too heavy to lift. But I couldn't leave. Something about this place, about the voice, held me in place. It was like a force pulling me forward, forcing me to listen, to understand. "You came here because you've broken the rule," the voice continued, its tone now more insistent, more threatening. "No one is safe when the rules are broken." "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding weak even to myself. "What rule? What do you want from us?" There was a long pause, so long that I thought the voice would remain silent, but then it answered, slow and deliberate. "The rules of the Nightmare Man." I felt a cold chill run down my spine, and it wasn't just from the temperature. My mind flashed back to Emma's warning, to the way she had described the Nightmare Man in the most cryptic way possible. A man? Or something else? What did it all mean? Before I could think further, the voice spoke again, sharper this time. "You're not supposed to be here." The rules were clear. And then, as if to punctuate the warning, the lights flickered. The entire church seemed to groan in protest, the ancient beams above us creaking as if something heavy was shifting above. I glanced up, my heart skipping a beat, but there was nothing there, only shadows. But those shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting in ways they shouldn't. I turned to my friends, my mind racing. "We need to leave. Now." But just as I took a step back toward the door, something stopped me. A loud thump echoed from somewhere deeper inside the church, followed by another. It was as if something, or someone, was moving behind the walls, walking slowly, deliberately. I could see the fear in my friend's eyes. Mark was already backing away, but Sarah, she looked transfixed, her gaze locked on the altar at the far end of the room. There was something there, a flickering shadow that seemed to move on its own, defying logic. My skin crawled. "Sarah," I called, but she didn't respond. She was too absorbed, too focused on whatever was happening at the altar. Her steps were slow, as though she was compelled to go toward it. "Sarah, no!" Mark shouted, but it was too late. Sarah was already walking toward the altar, each step echoing in the vast emptiness. I tried to grab her arm, but she jerked away from me, her expression distant, her eyes glazed over, as if she was in some trance. "Sarah!" I yelled again, panic rising in my chest. The shadows around the altar seemed to grow darker, more solid, until a figure began to form. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of a tall, dark shape that moved with an unnatural grace. It was like a man, but it wasn't. There was something wrong with the way it stood, with the way it hovered in place as if it wasn't quite part of this world. "Sarah, stop!" I grabbed her arm, pulling her back with all my strength. But she didn't resist. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw recognition, but it was gone in the blink of an eye. She had already crossed the threshold. And then the figure moved. The shadows around it writhed, and in an instant, the air grew cold, so cold that I could see my breath hanging in the air. A low, grinding noise filled the room, like something ancient and powerful was awakening from a long slumber. The Nightmare Man was real. We backed away, my pulse racing, my body shaking as I pulled Sarah back toward the door. But the figure didn't move. It didn't need to. It was already there, filling the space with its presence, with its terrible power. A voice like nails scraping against metal filled my head, so loud that I could hardly think. "You've broken the rule." We ran. The door slammed shut behind us with a deafening thud, and the world outside the church seemed impossibly quiet, as though the air itself had been stolen from our lungs. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the door handle, but it was locked. No matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't budge. Mark and Sarah were already panicking, yelling and trying to push the door open. It felt as though we were trapped, as if something, someone, was keeping us inside. I turned to the windows, trying to find a way out, but they were barred, their glass cracked and aged beyond repair. And then, from behind us, came the voice again, louder now, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've broken the rule. Now you will pay the price." It was right behind us. I turned, my heart racing. There, in the doorway leading deeper into the church, stood the Nightmare Man. His silhouette was barely visible, but the air around him shimmered, like reality itself couldn't quite hold his shape. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel him, feel the darkness that clung to him like a second skin. And then I understood. The rules were real. The price would be paid. I don't know how long we stood there, trapped in that suffocating silence, staring at the figure that was now fully manifested in the doorway. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my throat dry, every instinct telling me to run, to fight, to do anything to escape. But my feet felt glued to the floor, and every movement I made felt like it was being watched, calculated. The Nightmare Man didn't move, didn't even blink. His figure was barely more than a shadow, shifting and flickering like a broken reflection. But the darkness that surrounded him seemed alive, pulsating with an unnatural energy. It was as if reality itself was bending around him, warping in ways I couldn't understand. What are you?" I found myself whispering, my voice barely audible over the frantic beating of my heart. For a moment, there was no response, just the sound of our ragged breathing and the oppressive silence pressing in from all sides. Then, the voice came again, low and cold, cutting through the air like a knife. "I am the Nightmare Man. And you, little ones, have broken the rule." A shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to run, to escape, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure. I had heard stories, vague warnings about things that hunted people who crossed certain lines, but I had never believed them. No one had. No one ever took them seriously. But now, I felt the full weight of those warnings crashing down on me. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. What rule? We didn't break any rules. We didn't know. The Nightmare Man's presence seemed to intensify, a suffocating darkness filling the room. The shadows twisted and writhed, crawling toward us like they had a life of their own. My body screamed at me to run, but the words came again, the voice so loud it rattled the walls. "You trespassed where you were not meant to be. You broke the unspoken rule. And now, you will pay the price." I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but I couldn't make a sound. It was as if my voice was stolen from me, my body paralyzed with fear. We were trapped. There was no way out. "Please," Mark finally managed to choke out, his voice raw with panic. "We didn't mean to." But his words were drowned out by the growing intensity of the darkness. The shadows seemed to close in on us, moving as one, a living, breathing entity that was closing the gap. The Nightmare Man's form flickered again, the air around him distorting, and then, it spoke again, its voice deep and resonant, almost like a growl. "You think you can escape your fate?" Before any of us could react, a deafening sound ripped through the air, the unmistakable sound of something cracking, something breaking. I looked around in a panic, trying to figure out what had happened. And then I saw it. The walls. They were shifting, cracking, breaking apart before my eyes. The wooden beams above us groaned in protest, splintering as if the very foundation of the church was being torn apart. A cold gust of wind slammed into us, and for a moment, I thought I saw the outlines of figures, shadows in the corners of the room, their faces hidden in the dark. "Get out of here!" I screamed, my voice finally breaking free from its prison, and I pulled Sarah's arm, dragging her away from the altar, away from the Nightmare Man. But we couldn't escape. The walls were closing in on us, and the shadows were alive, pulling at our clothes, tugging at our limbs, keeping us from moving faster. "The rules have been broken," the Nightmare Man whispered again, his voice now an overwhelming force, pressing against our chests like the weight of the world. "And the price must be paid." I didn't know what it meant, but I could feel it, something was about to happen, something that none of us could stop. The oppressive force seemed to grow stronger, the air heavier, suffocating us. We needed to get out. We needed to find a way, but every step felt like it took us farther into the nightmare. The figures in the shadows grew clearer, and I realized, they were people. Or what was left of them. Their faces were pale, twisted in expressions of torment. They looked like they had been here for years, maybe decades, trapped in this place, consumed by the very force that had taken hold of the church. The nightmare man stepped forward, his figure flickering in and out of focus like a glitch in reality. He was right in front of me now, his presence so powerful that it felt like I could taste the darkness on my tongue. He didn't need to touch us to make us feel his power. "You can't escape what's already been set in motion," he said, his voice deep and unnatural. "The rule has been broken, and now you belong to me." I was frozen, unable to move, unable to think. His words, heavy with a terrible finality, were sinking in. We had no way out. We had no way to fix what we had done. And I could feel it, we were being pulled towards something dark and suffocating. It was as if we were being slowly consumed, drawn into the very heart of the nightmare. Mark, who had been standing beside me, suddenly gasped, his eyes wide with horror. He was looking at something behind us, something we hadn't seen before. It was as if the very air had thickened, the shadows themselves becoming solid, reaching out toward us. I turned, and that's when I saw it. A figure, standing at the back of the church, near the broken stained glass windows. It was tall, just like the nightmare man, but this one was different. It was hunched, twisted, its body contorted in unnatural angles, like a broken marionette. Its face was covered with a mask. No, not a mask. It was skin, stretched tight over the skull, grotesque and pale. And its eyes. Two hollow, black sockets that seemed to burn with an unnatural fire. It was watching us. Watching me. The nightmare man's voice sounded again, this time more insistent, more commanding. "You must face what is coming. The price is paid in blood." I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but my mouth was dry, my voice lost. The figure in the shadows moved toward us, its body jerking unnaturally with each step. It was coming for us, and I could feel the dread creeping up my spine, stealing my breath. It was like the air had thickened into a suffocating fog. "Run!" I screamed, pulling Sarah and Mark with me, but the walls were closing in. The door was gone, swallowed by the darkness. There was no escape. Panic surged through me as I pulled at Sarah's arm, desperately trying to move away from the advancing figure. The world around us seemed to bend and twist, the very foundation of reality crumbling with every step. The nightmare man's presence loomed in the corner of my vision, his oppressive energy keeping us locked in place, unable to break free. But it wasn't just him. It was everything. The shadows on the walls were no longer just shapes, they were figures, moving, shifting, as though they had a life of their own. The air was thick, suffocating, every breath feeling heavier than the last. My skin crawled, my hands clammy with sweat as I tried to drag my friends toward an escape that didn't exist. "Why can't we leave?" Mark gasped, his voice barely audible over the terrible stillness of the church. He stumbled beside me, his eyes darting around, searching for any kind of way out. But there was none. The walls, once ancient and cracked, were now closing in on us, the space around us shrinking with every passing second. The once ornate stained glass windows were gone, replaced by solid, impenetrable blackness. The ceiling, once high and expansive, had lowered itself so much that I felt suffocated beneath its weight. "We need to run," Sarah cried, her voice shrill with fear. She was pulling in the opposite direction, her body trembling as she struggled to break free from my grip. But there was no escape. The nightmare man stepped forward, his dark form flickering like an unfinished thought. Each step he took seemed to warp the very air around him, as though his mere presence was distorting reality itself. His voice came again, more insistent, more chilling. "You think you can escape?" The shadows, once merely creeping along the walls, now began to move in sync with him. They stretched toward us, long and twisted, reaching out with claw-like tendrils that scraped against the floor, crawling toward us with predatory intent. I could hear the scraping of something far too large dragging across the ground, like nails on glass. It was close. So close. We have to move. I screamed, my voice breaking as I spun around, my feet unsteady. But even as I turned, the darkness closed in tighter, the shadows pressing against me, clawing at my legs, as though the very air was alive, consuming us, pulling us deeper into the nightmare. And then I felt it. Cold fingers, icy and tight, wrapped around my wrist. I looked down, but there was no one there. Just the darkness, stretching like an endless abyss, pulling at my body. It was as if the shadows themselves were dragging me down. Let go. I shouted, jerking my arm away, but the grip tightened, and I felt a cold, clammy sensation crawl up my arm. It was alive, the darkness. It was feeding off of me. I turned to my friends, but Sarah was no longer beside me. She was gone, her figure swallowed by the shadows that now moved like a tide, ebbing and flowing, reaching out like a monstrous hand. My heart skipped a beat. Sarah! I screamed. But there was no answer. Only the sound of the shadows shifting, of something, someone, being pulled into the darkness. Then, I heard a whisper. Not from the nightmare man, but from behind me, from somewhere deeper in the shadows. 1 down, 2 to go. I whipped around, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was so close now, I could almost feel the breath on the back of my neck. But when I turned, there was nothing, no one there. Just the shadows, twisting and writhing, like a living thing that fed off fear. You think you can hide? The voice asked again, this time clearer, colder. You can't hide from me. You can't escape me. The nightmare was closing in, and I was running out of time. Mark was still with me, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. We need to stick together, he said, his voice trembling. Maybe we can find a way out if we... But before he could finish, the floor beneath us cracked. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the church as the ground seemed to shift, a huge gap opening up before us, like a black maw that threatened to swallow us whole. I gasped, stepping back, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were too close, and the shadows, now thicker than ever, were crawling toward us. There was no escape. Only the darkness, the unrelenting presence of the nightmare man and his realm. No. I whispered. Please, no. And then, from the depths of the crack in the floor, something moved. Something large, something monstrous. It rose from the darkness, its form twisting like smoke, a hulking figure that loomed over us, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The nightmare man was no longer alone. Whatever had emerged from the crack was with him, part of him, feeding off the same darkness that had claimed the church. Mark stumbled backward, falling to his knees. We're going to die, he whispered, his voice filled with despair. And for a moment, I believed him. There was no hope. No way out. The church was alive, and it was swallowing us whole. But then I remembered something, the rules. Emma had said something about rules. About how the nightmare man fed on those who broke them. Had we broken them, or was it something else? Was there a way to survive this nightmare? I couldn't remember. My mind was racing, but the answer was just out of reach. You have broken the rule, the nightmare man's voice echoed again, booming in the confines of the church. Now you must face your fate. The shadows closed in even tighter, and I could feel the darkness wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I turned to look at Mark, but his face was gone, swallowed by the dark. It was just me now, alone in this twisted, haunted place. And then, a terrible thought crossed my mind. Was this it? I asked, barely able to speak. Was the price just to die here? The shadows whispered back. Not death, not yet. First, you must suffer. I turned and ran, but there was no escaping. No getting away. The darkness was everywhere. The walls pressed in from all sides, closing me in. The air was thick with the weight of something ancient, something hungry. And the darkness was consuming me. I was running, but I couldn't escape. Every step I took felt heavier, the ground beneath me shifting as if it were made of thick, shifting mud. The walls were closing in, their darkened, twisted forms pressing in from all sides. The air itself felt suffocating, each breath coming with effort, like I was inhaling the very essence of fear. But there was no time to think about that. No time to wonder if I would ever breathe freely again. All I could think about was getting away from the nightmare that was consuming everything, pulling me into its darkness. The nightmare man's laughter echoed in the distance, cold and cruel, reverberating through the walls, each note chilling me to my core. His words from earlier rang in my ears, "Not yet. First, you must suffer." It was a promise, but not one I wanted to keep. The shadows crawled after me, their tendrils reaching out like greedy hands, tugging at my clothes, scratching at my skin. The very air I breathed felt thick with the weight of their hunger. It was as if the shadows were feeding off my fear, growing stronger, more tangible with each passing second. And then I saw it. A flicker of light, a tiny gleam that cut through the thick blackness like a knife. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A crack in the wall, a space, a way out. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward it, my feet pounding against the cold stone floor, my body desperate for any sign of escape. But as I neared the crack, I realized it wasn't an exit. It was a trap. A voice, low and guttural, came from the darkness beside me. "You think you can escape? You can't hide from me." I froze. I knew that voice. It was the nightmare man's, but this time, it was different, closer, more real. It wasn't just his voice that I heard. It was him. His presence. I could feel him at the edge of my mind, tugging at the very fabric of my thoughts. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows around me seemed to pulse, their movements almost rhythmic, like they were alive, breathing, waiting. And then, there he was. The nightmare man stood at the end of the hallway, his form flickering like a malfunctioning television screen. He was taller than before, the darkness swirling around him, feeding off his every move. His eyes were the only things I could see clearly, two glowing orbs of malevolent energy that bore down on me, searing into my very soul. "You have no idea what you've done." His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "You've trespassed into my world, and now you'll pay the price." I couldn't move. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if the shadows were holding me in place, pressing against my skin like a vice. I could feel them crawling under my clothes, seeping into my veins. But then, a whisper came. A voice, soft and urgent, cutting through the tension. "There's still a way out." I blinked. The voice was familiar, but faint, like it was coming from somewhere distant, somewhere beyond my reach. Was it Emma? Was it Mark? Or was it just a trick of my mind? I didn't have time to think about it. The nightmare man was closing in. His footsteps echoed with each movement, the sound deep and ominous, reverberating through the walls. I had to do something, anything. "The rules," I whispered to myself. "I have to follow the rules. The rules. The broken rule. The one that had condemned us to this nightmare." But what were the rules? What did I have to do to survive? To undo the damage we had caused? I could barely focus, my mind swirling with panic, with fear. The nightmare man was only a few steps away now, his form flickering violently as he moved toward me, his face obscured in shadow, save for those glowing eyes that pierced through the dark. "It's too late for you," he said, his voice low and menacing. "No one escapes me. Not once you've crossed into my domain." His words cut through me like a blade. I was going to die here. There was no escaping it. The walls were closing in, and the shadows were growing thicker, suffocating me, wrapping around my body like chains. My skin burned where they touched me, a cold, searing sensation that made me feel like I was being consumed from the inside out. But then, I remembered. The price. The price of survival. Wait. I screamed, my voice trembling, my mind racing. What's the price? What do I have to do to survive? The nightmare man stopped. His form flickered, and for the first time, he seemed to hesitate, as if considering my words. His eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. You think you can bargain with me? He snarled. You think you can negotiate your way out? I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I was desperate. Desperate for any chance, any sign of a way out of this nightmare. I'll do anything, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. Please, just let me live. The nightmare man's form seemed to grow darker, more massive, and then he stepped closer. I could feel the air growing colder, the darkness pressing in tighter. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating. You should have thought about that before you broke the rule, he said, his voice low, cold, and final. You can't escape what's already been set in motion. You cannot escape your fate. And then, everything went black. The world was engulfed in blackness, suffocating, pressing down on me like 1,000 tons of stone. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. My mind felt like it was unraveling, spinning out of control. The sensation of being trapped, alone, was unbearable. I tried to move, to scream, but nothing came. It was as if the darkness had swallowed me whole. And then, I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible over the suffocating silence. You thought you could break the rules and walk away unscathed. The voice echoed around me, distant but so close at the same time. I knew who it was. It was the nightmare man. His presence was unmistakable, an overwhelming force that filled every corner of this dark void. You should have followed the rules. The words felt like a cold slap, the final nail in the coffin. I had failed. We all had. Mark, Sarah, Emma, they were all gone now, swallowed by the darkness that had overtaken the church, each of them paying the price for our recklessness. I had been so focused on survival, on trying to find an escape, that I had forgotten the most important rule of all, the rule that had kept us safe until now. I had broken it. And now, I was going to pay. You broke the rule, the nightmare man's voice came again, this time closer. And now, I'll show you the price of that. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest. It was like being pierced by 1,000 needles, each one cutting through my skin, my flesh, my very soul. I gasped, clutching at my chest, but there was nothing to hold on to. The pain intensified, burning like fire, searing through every nerve, every fiber of my being. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even move. The darkness consumed me, the shadows crawling under my skin, inside my veins, like a disease. You are mine now. The nightmare man's words were a low growl, reverberating in my mind, filling every space, every thought. You cannot escape me. You will never escape. The pain grew, pulsing, rhythmic. It was like my body was being torn apart from the inside. I felt like I was being stretched beyond my limits, my body contorting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And yet, it was happening. It was real. In that moment, I understood the truth. The nightmare man wasn't just some monster. He wasn't a creature of flesh and bone. He was the embodiment of the rule. The very force that governed the laws of this twisted world. He was the punishment for those who dared to defy what was set in motion. The rules weren't just there to keep us safe. They were the foundation of everything. Without them, the darkness would consume us all. You broke the rule, he repeated, his voice now a growl in my ear. And now, you belong to me. With those words, the pain stopped. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, the weight of it all crashing down on me. The world around me was still pitch black, but I could feel it now, the change. Something was different. The oppressive weight of the darkness had lifted, but there was something else now. A presence, a force, that was inside me. I could feel it, pulsing through my veins, a constant hum that resonated with every heartbeat. It was like I had been branded, marked as his own. I was his. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't real. I'm not yours. But deep down, I knew it was true. The moment I had broken the rule, I had sealed my fate. I was no longer just a victim. I was part of the nightmare. A figure emerged from the shadows in front of me. It was him. The Nightmare Man. He stood tall, his dark form flickering in and out of existence like a glitch in the fabric of reality. His face was still obscured, only those glowing eyes visible, burning with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. You don't get to decide, he said, his voice thick with amusement. You are mine now. And you will carry the weight of your choices for eternity. He stepped closer, his presence suffocating, his shadow stretching long across the ground. Every step he took seemed to distort the world around him, warping reality itself. The very air hummed with his power, a force so strong that I could feel it vibrating in my bones. What do you want from me? I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know what else to say. It was all so overwhelming. The terror, the helplessness, the despair. I had no idea how to fight back. No idea how to escape this nightmare. He tilted his head slightly, his glowing eyes narrowing. I don't want anything from you, he said, his voice soft, almost patronizing. You're the one who wanted to break the rules. You're the one who wanted to survive at all costs. I didn't understand. How had I been so stupid? I had been so desperate to get away from the darkness, to escape the nightmare, that I had forgotten the most basic of truths: breaking the rules had a price. And now, I was paying it. You think you're special, the Nightmare Man continued, his voice growing colder. But you're just like the rest. Just another fool who thought they could escape me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight back. But I couldn't. My body was no longer mine. I was trapped inside myself, a prisoner in my own skin, bound by the rules I had broken. What happens now? I whispered, my voice cracking with fear. The Nightmare Man smiled, a twisted, cruel expression that sent shivers down my spine. Now. He stepped closer, his form darkening, his presence more oppressive than ever. Now, you become part of the nightmare. You become the punishment for others who break the rules. You will carry my mark, and when they come, you will be the one to remind them of their fate. And with that, he was gone. The darkness swallowed me whole once more, but this time, I didn't fight it. I didn't scream. I just accepted it. Because I knew the truth now. The price of survival wasn't just death. It was becoming a part of the nightmare. And once you entered, there was no way out. The darkness never truly left. At first, I tried to fight it, tried to push against the suffocating grip that the shadows had over me. But it was no use. Every time I moved, the void stretched further, pulling me back. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped inside this prison of my own making. The rules had already claimed me, and now, I was bound to them. It was hard to tell if I was awake or asleep. Time had become irrelevant, a blur of moments that melded together. I would find myself in places I didn't recognize, empty rooms that seemed to shift and change with every blink, hallways that stretched on forever. But no matter where I was, the shadows were always there, lurking, waiting. And every time I looked into the darkness, I saw those eyes. The glowing, malevolent eyes of the Nightmare Man, watching me, judging me. You're mine now. His voice would echo in my mind, like a distant whisper that reverberated through my bones. You will never be free. Not until the end of time. His words were a constant reminder of the price I had paid. I didn't know what was worse, the shadows that now clung to me like a second skin, or the overwhelming sense of dread that came with the knowledge that I was no longer just a victim. I was part of the nightmare. I had become a force of darkness, a harbinger of terror for anyone who dared break the rules. There were times when I tried to reach out to my friends, to Mark, Emma, Sarah, to anyone. I tried to scream, to ask for help. But no one could hear me. The world felt distant, unreachable. It was as though I were locked in a parallel reality, separated from everything and everyone I had known. I remembered the rules, the ones I had broken. Never leave the designated areas. Don't make noise after midnight. Always follow the markers. And above all, never defy the will of the darkness. I had broken those rules, and now I was paying the price. The mark that the nightmare man had placed on me had changed me. I could feel it inside me, pulsing, twisting with the shadows. It was as if the very essence of the darkness had fused with my soul, binding me to its will. I could sense things now, things that weren't there before. I could feel the rules. Feel the presence of others who had broken them. I could feel their fear, their desperation. And worse, I could feel them coming. I wasn't sure if they were real or just a part of the nightmare, but I could sense them, other people, lost like I was, searching for a way out, breaking the rules just as I had. And I knew what that meant. They're here. The nightmare man's voice rumbled in my mind. You'll be the one to find them. You'll be the one to remind them of the price. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be the one to hunt them down. But it was inevitable. The rules demanded it. And now that I was part of the nightmare, I had no choice. The mark on my soul bound me to the darkness, and I would carry out its will. I stumbled through the endless void, my feet dragging, my mind spinning. The walls around me shifted, and I felt the familiar pull of the darkness urging me forward, guiding me. The air felt thick with tension, as if something was waiting just beyond the horizon, something hungry. Then I saw them. A figure, faint at first, barely visible in the distance. But as I moved closer, the outline became clearer. It was a man, a young man, stumbling through the shadows, his hands trembling. He was lost, just like I had been. His eyes darted around, looking for something, anything to hold on to. He didn't know it yet, but he had broken the rules. I could feel his fear, his desperation. I could feel the weight of the darkness pulling at him, just as it had pulled at me. He's here, the nightmare man's voice whispered in my mind, a twisted satisfaction in his words. Go to him. Remind him of the price. I didn't want to. I wanted to turn away, to run. But I couldn't. The mark inside me burned, the shadows tugging at my limbs, urging me forward. The man looked up, his eyes wide with panic. He saw me, saw the darkness swirling around me, and froze. For a moment, we stood there, locked in a silent confrontation. And then he began to run. He was fast, too fast for me. His footsteps echoed through the hollow space, reverberating off the walls as he desperately tried to escape. But no matter how fast he ran, I could feel the darkness closing in on him. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be the one who hunted him down. But I had no choice. The shadows were already wrapping around him, pulling him into the abyss. I was only the messenger, the one who would deliver the punishment. But as I closed the distance between us, something shifted inside me. The man's fear wasn't just palpable, it was familiar. It was the same fear I had felt, the same fear that had driven me to break the rules in the first place. He wasn't just a stranger to me. He was me. I reached out, my hand trembling, as if I could pull him back from the edge. But it was too late. The shadows enveloped him, pulling him into the dark void with a chilling hiss. His screams echoed in the emptiness, fading away as the darkness consumed him. I stood there, staring into the abyss where he had been. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just carrying out the punishment. I was becoming the punishment. The rules had marked me, twisted me, and now, I was no different from the Nightmare Man. We were the same, beasts of the darkness, enforcers of the rule, harbingers of doom. And there would be no end. You will carry the price, the Nightmare Man's voice whispered, cold and final. You will carry it for eternity. I was the nightmare now. I was the one who would hunt those who broke the rules. And I would never be free. It had been days, or maybe weeks, time had become a distant memory. The void I inhabited had no concept of time. There was only the endless blackness, stretching out in all directions, a consuming, oppressive force that pressed in on me from all sides. The shadows, the presence of the darkness, felt like it was alive, breathing with me, in me. I had become part of it, and there was no escaping that fact. I stumbled through the endless nothingness, feeling the mark inside me pulse, a constant reminder of the price I had paid. The Nightmare Man's voice had not left me since that fateful moment. It whispered to me in the dark, his words twisting through my thoughts like vines strangling the life out of me. You are the price now. His voice had become a part of my very being, and I hated it. I hated the way it made my skin crawl, the way it made me feel like I was his, like I had never had a choice. The mark, the curse, it burned with each step I took. I could feel it inside me, spreading like wildfire, binding me tighter and tighter to the nightmare. There was no escape. I paused, trying to shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. But it was no use. There was no way to shake it off. Every corner of the void was saturated with fear, a kind of fear that I had never known before. It wasn't just my own fear anymore. I could feel the fear of others. Their fear. The people who had broken the rules, just like I had. I could sense them, out there, lost in the same endless blackness. Their souls were trapped, their fate sealed by their own actions. They were just like me, but there was something different about them. I could feel the wrongness of it, the way they were struggling against the dark forces that had taken hold of them. But there was no hope for them. Just like there was no hope for me. I had become one of the bound souls, the enforcers of the rules. And now, I would hunt them, just as the Nightmare Man had once hunted me. Find them, his voice whispered, barely audible. They're close. They have broken the rules. They will pay the price. It was a command, a cold and final one. I had no choice but to obey. I moved through the shadows, my every step dragging me further into the abyss. The air around me was thick with the scent of decay, the rotting remnants of souls lost to the darkness. The walls, if you could even call them walls, were like ripples in the fabric of reality, constantly shifting and changing, as though the void itself were alive. And then, I saw them. A figure, faint and far off in the distance. At first, I thought it was just another illusion, a trick of the shadows. But as I drew closer, I could feel it. This one was real. This was another soul, another broken one who had dared defy the rules. I felt it in the air, his fear. It was like a tangible force, hanging in the atmosphere like a storm about to break. I could hear his ragged breaths, his footsteps faltering in the dark. He didn't know I was coming. He couldn't see me, but I could see him. I was no longer the victim, no longer the desperate, terrified soul I had once been. I was the nightmare now. I was the one who would bring the darkness to those who strayed from the path. And I was close, so close. I reached out, my hand trembling. I could feel the shadows respond to me, swirling around my fingers like smoke, pulling at the man's form. He was still oblivious to my presence, his eyes wide with fear, his mind desperately grasping at the last threads of hope. Please, he whispered into the dark, his voice shaking. Please. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to survive. I didn't. But it was too late. His words, his pleas for mercy, they meant nothing. They were hollow, empty, just like mine had been. The rules were absolute. There was no mercy for those who defied them. I reached forward, my hand brushing his shoulder. His body went rigid with terror, and I could feel the coldness of the darkness seeping into his skin, just as it had done to me. He gasped, turning to face me, his eyes wide with panic as the realization hit him. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, no, no. Please, I didn't break the rules, I swear." But I could feel it, he had. The rules could never be ignored. He had crossed a line, and now, the price had come to collect. The shadows erupted around us, pulling him deeper into the void. His screams echoed through the dark, desperate and filled with terror. I watched, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness in my chest. The darkness swallowed him whole, just as it had swallowed me. "You are mine now," the Nightmare Man's voice rumbled in my mind, the words cold and final. "Just like the others. The darkness will claim them all, and you will help it." I felt the last remnants of his life force disappear into the void, and with it, a part of me died as well. I was no longer human. I was something else now. Something darker, more terrible. The enforcer of the rules. A hunter of lost souls. But there was no satisfaction in it. No joy. Just an endless, gnawing emptiness. I turned away, moving deeper into the void, searching for the next one. There was always another, always more. The rules had to be enforced. The price had to be paid. And I was the one who would collect. "There is no escape," the Nightmare Man whispered in my mind once more. "You will never be free." I wasn't sure what was worse, knowing that I had become the nightmare, or realizing that there was no end to it. No end to the hunt. No end to the darkness. And I would never escape. The void felt heavier with each passing moment. It wasn't just the endless darkness, the thick, choking air. It was something else, something deeper. A sense of inevitability that pressed in on me from all sides, squeezing the life out of my thoughts, my will. I had no control anymore. No choice. I was a part of this nightmare, and there was nothing I could do to escape. The rules. They were absolute. And I had learned that the hard way. Each step I took through the oppressive darkness, each soul I found, was the same. A broken figure, desperate, pleading. It didn't matter how much they begged. It didn't matter if they cried out for mercy. The rules were clear, and the price had to be paid. No one could defy them. No one could escape. But there was something inside me, deep down, that was starting to crack. The weight of it all, the endless hunt, the darkness, the emptiness, it was becoming too much. I had lost myself in it. I had become part of the nightmare, and in doing so, I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten what it felt like to be alive. I stumbled through the void, my eyes bleary, my body aching from the relentless march. The air was thick with the remnants of lost souls, their whispers echoing in the shadows, their voices like an endless chorus of sorrow. They had all been here before me, all fallen into the same trap, and now, they were just memories, lost in the dark. I could still hear the Nightmare Man's voice in my mind. His words were like a constant drumbeat, pounding in my skull, reminding me of my purpose, reminding me of the price that had to be paid. "The rules are eternal," he would say. "And you are the enforcer. You will never escape." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout, to demand answers. But it was no use. No one could hear me. No one cared. I was just another broken soul, lost in the nightmare, destined to carry out the will of the darkness. But then, something changed. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of light in the distance, like a star breaking through the eternal blackness. I could feel it pulling at me, drawing me toward it. A glimmer of hope, or perhaps a trap. I wasn't sure anymore. I moved toward the light, my feet dragging, my mind spinning. The shadows hissed and writhed around me, resisting, but I pushed forward. There was something there, something waiting for me. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing alone in the distance. A woman. She was different from the others. There was something about her that felt familiar. Her eyes, wide and filled with terror, locked onto mine the moment I stepped into view. But she didn't run. She didn't scream. She just stood there, waiting. I could feel it then, the connection. A thread of recognition, thin and fragile, but undeniable. She was not like the others. She hadn't broken the rules in the same way. No, she had done something far worse. She had challenged the rules. The woman stepped forward, her movements slow, deliberate. There was something strange in the way she moved, as if she were walking through the air itself, like the shadows couldn't touch her. It was as if she were made of something else, something more. "You're here," she said softly, her voice a whisper in the oppressive silence. "I've been waiting for you." I stared at her, my mind racing. How could she know? How could she know that I had come? The woman smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was a twisted thing, full of knowing and malice. It made my stomach turn. "You've been hunting the others, haven't you?" she asked, her voice lilting, almost mocking. "But you don't understand, do you? You don't understand what you've become." I took a step back, my heart racing. There was something wrong about her. Something inhuman. But I couldn't stop myself from being drawn to her, like a moth to a flame. "No," I whispered. "I'm doing what I have to do. I'm following the rules." She laughed then, a soft, dark laugh that sent chills down my spine. "The rules are a lie," she said, her voice dropping to a near growl. "The rules were created to control you. To make you believe you have no choice. But you do. You always did. The nightmare man, the rules, they're all part of the same thing. A game. A trap." I could feel my chest tightening as she spoke. The words twisted in my mind, unearthing the fragments of doubt that had been buried deep inside me. Was she telling the truth? Could it really be that simple? She took another step toward me, her eyes burning with an intensity that made my heart race. "You were never meant to be a hunter," she continued. "You were meant to be a victim, just like the others. But you're not. You broke free, didn't you? You're not the same as the others." I stared at her, confusion and terror swirling in my chest. Could she be right? Had I somehow broken free? Or was this just another trap, another layer of the nightmare designed to twist me further? Before I could ask her anything more, she reached out and touched my arm. The moment her hand made contact, a wave of cold washed over me. The shadows around us seemed to recoil, as if they were afraid of her. And then, everything clicked. The rules. The punishment. The hunt. It was all part of a much larger plan, a scheme so intricate, so cruel, that it made my head spin. I wasn't just a victim. I had never been a victim. I was part of the game. I had been chosen. The woman's eyes glinted as she spoke the words I feared the most. "You're not the hunter. You're the next sacrifice." Before I could process her words, everything shattered. The darkness around us rippled like water, distorting and twisting in impossible shapes. The world broke apart, and I was torn from the woman's grasp, falling into the abyss once more. But now, I understood. The rules, the hunt, the nightmare, it was all just a part of the bigger picture. A game. And I was nothing more than a piece on the board. And now, I was the one being hunted. I was falling. The void opened up beneath me, a yawning chasm that seemed to stretch on for eternity. The darkness around me was thick, suffocating. It pressed in from all sides, each breath I took more labored than the last. The shadows whispered, voices overlapping in a chorus of despair. I could hear them now, the souls I had hunted, the ones I had condemned to this place. Their cries, their pleading, it all echoed in my mind like a broken record, drowning out any sense of self. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to stop me from realizing the truth. I wasn't the hunter. I never had been. The woman had shown me that, in those final moments. She had revealed the one thing I had failed to see all along: I was just another piece of the puzzle. Another part of the Nightmare Man's twisted game. As I fell, my thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and horror. I wasn't meant to enforce the rules. I had been tricked, just like all the others. The Nightmare Man wasn't just punishing those who broke the rules, he was shaping them, creating them. Every soul that fell into his hands was part of a cycle that fed his power. And I was nothing more than a part of it. I wasn't meant to be a hunter. I was meant to be a sacrifice. I slammed into the ground, the impact sending a jolt through my spine. My body felt like it had been shattered, every bone, every sinew aching. But I didn't care. I had no more care for my own survival. The truth had consumed me, and now there was nothing left but the knowledge that I was lost. The darkness pressed in on me, thick as tar, and I struggled to my feet. It was then that I realized, I wasn't alone. The shadows around me swirled, taking on form. Figures materialized from the void, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes wide with terror. These were the souls who had fallen before me, the ones I had once hunted. They now stood before me, their expressions hollow, drained of all life. But there was one thing that stood out: their eyes. They were the same as mine. Empty. Lost. Dead. The woman's voice echoed in the distance. "You've done what you were meant to do. But now it's time to pay the price." I spun around, searching for her, but she was gone. Only the darkness remained. The figures stepped forward, their faces blank and devoid of emotion. But there was something in their movements that made my blood run cold. They weren't just lost souls. They were part of the nightmare too, just like me. I took a step back, panic rising in my chest. No, this isn't what I... But the figures advanced, surrounding me. Their cold hands reached for me, their touch like ice. It felt as though the void itself was wrapping around me, pulling me down into its depths. "It's too late," one of the figures whispered. "The rules are absolute. And you..." His voice was drowned out as another figure spoke, and another. The whispers filled my mind, a cacophony of voices, all saying the same thing. "You broke the final rule." I shook my head, unable to comprehend their words. No, I didn't. But the truth was inescapable. I had broken the final rule by thinking that I could break free. By thinking that I could somehow escape the Nightmare Man's grasp. The figures closed in around me, their bodies melding with the darkness. The weight of it pressed against me, suffocating me, until there was nothing left but the overwhelming, crushing pressure of the void. The final rule. It wasn't about breaking the rules of the game. It was about accepting your fate. Accepting that you were never meant to escape. "The rules are eternal," the Nightmare Man's voice echoed in my mind. "And you were never meant to survive." I couldn't breathe. The air was gone, replaced by an all-consuming darkness. The voices of the lost souls faded, and I felt my own presence slipping away, like sand through my fingers. I was becoming part of it. I was becoming part of the nightmare, just like the others. There was no escape. No way out. The last thought I had before the darkness consumed me completely was that maybe, just maybe, there had never been a way out. I had always been part of the game. The rules had always been there, watching, waiting. And in the end, I had been the one who broke them. But the price for breaking them wasn't death. It was something far worse. I had become the darkness. I had become the nightmare. And now, there was no one left to hunt. Only the endless void.